Hi, I'm Mark Regev, and today we are recording Israel Undiplomatic from the JNS's first International Policy Summit, and I'm here, as per usual, at the summit with my co-host, Ruthie Blum.
Hi, Mark. It's really fantastic to be here because there's something extremely unusual about having a conference in Israel that is with a conservative bent, pro-Israeli government bent. This is not the usual type of conferences that we're seeing in Israel of late.
So it was very interesting, and of course, so far, I presume we've got more stuff ahead of us, but up until now, I presume the high point of the conference was the address by the Prime Minister last night. He spoke for 40 minutes, I actually timed him, and he said some very important messages. And with your permission, I'll tell you what I thought was most important.
Go for it.
The matter that is on Israeli minds today is the American negotiations with Iran. And there are many Israelis who are concerned about these negotiations. They're afraid, is Trump really going to hold on to the strong position that Iran's nuclear program has to be dismantled? Or is he going to do like what Obama did, but with minor changes? And, of course, the Prime Minister, and no Prime Minister, I think, would say anything against the American president publicly. But the Prime Minister, I thought, was very clear last night when he articulated what is the sort of deal that Israel can live with. And in no uncertain terms, he said the deal has to mean that Iran no longer can enrich uranium, that there is no more enrichment of uranium. He said no peaceful nuclear power enriches uranium. The only people who enrich uranium are people with military programs, and the Iranians say their program is for peaceful purposes. And he used the example of Libya once again. He did it when he was at the White House last time, when he said that was the diplomatic solution in Libya. The nuclear program was dismantled, not frozen, not just, they turned down the volume, but it's actually dismantled. And he said that's the sort of a deal that Israel can live with.
Well, I agree with you and disagree with you, and I'll tell you what I mean. I don't think Israel can live with any deal because any deal that Iran signs will be phony. And I'm hoping that Trump realizes it. And I think that Netanyahu's big dilemma right now is the following. Never before has there been such a pro-Israel president in the White House. And I know that Trump has good intentions. He prefers a deal over bombing, as he said. But last night or early this morning, depending on which clock you're talking about, he said that they're close to a deal. And I think any deal is bad, and I think Netanyahu believes that as well, though he doesn't say it. He says what Iran can't do. The thing is, you can't trust Iran to uphold any deal, just as you can't trust the Palestinians or any jihadist terrorist organizations, as we've seen over and over again. Now, Israel, I think, has a very small window to launch a strike against Iran because it is not just, Trump keeps saying that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. No, Iran cannot have nuclear anything. And using the example of Libya, that's all well and good, but Iran is a whole different kettle of fish, and it is the head of the octopus. Netanyahu knows it, but he also knows that Trump is a great friend to Israel, and he would never want to go up against him. I mean, and so he's in a big dilemma. He won't do something that opposes Trump's policies, but I'm saying that Israel can't afford to wait to see what to do. We have to preempt, and if we don't, we're just as we were. We said never again about the Holocaust. We said never again about October 7th, and we see this existential threat right in front of us. And if we don't preempt, then we've learned nothing.
So I'd ask you the following question. Last night in his address, the Prime Minister said he gave numerous examples of him standing up to Biden. He said at the beginning of the war, they said, just bomb from the air, don't send your forces in. And then the Americans said, don't go into Gaza City. And Netanyahu said, I need to go into Gaza City. And we went into Gaza City. And then he said, the Americans said, don't go to the Shifa hospital where Hamas had their headquarters. And he said, I stood up to Biden and I said, we needed to go in, and we went into the Shifa hospital. And he said it was the same about Khan Yunis and the same about Rafah in the south. In other words, the Prime Minister has shown that he can stand up to American pressure when he needs to. I'm not sure, however, that in the framework of this Donald Trump administration, which is so friendly, which is so warm, which is supplying Israel with the weapons that the Biden administration held up, which is standing 100% behind Israel at the UN and on all sorts of important issues, can Netanyahu really tell the U.S. president, go jump in the lake? If the president says today, I need just a certain amount of time to try to negotiate a deal, can Netanyahu really, is he really free to act? Does he not have to give the President of the United States, this President of the United States, the benefit of the doubt?
Well, of course. But see, this is exactly my point. With the Biden administration, he didn't really have a dilemma. He wasn't going to go up against Israel's greatest ally, but he did have to eventually put his foot down because Israel's security depended on it. This is a very different situation. The dilemma comes from these friendly relations because, of course, he's not going to want to go up against him. And I'm sure that behind the scenes, that's exactly what President Trump is saying. Give me a chance, and if not, we'll do this together. And I'm saying that that puts Netanyahu in a very difficult position, precisely because the last thing he wants to do is antagonize such a friendly administration, albeit that administration has a branch of isolationists that aren't very pro-Israel, but Trump is the one who calls the shots. But I'm saying no. That's why I am concerned, because I'm sure that Netanyahu has said to Trump, I'm giving you a chance. But if a deal is actually reached, we are in big trouble. Maybe not next week, but we are certainly in trouble, and we're in trouble in Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, everything. And I have to say, another person who made a great speech at our conference was Pastor John Hagee. And he was unequivocal about the need to destroy enemies and not apologize for it. And this
Ruthie,
is something...
Can I remind you, Pastor John Hagee is not the President of the United States. And I want to give you three scenarios, two good and one bad. Scenario number one is Trump can actually get a deal with all the pressure, with the threats of military force, with the economic pressure, with the weakness of the Iranian axis. He gets a good deal, the sort of deal that Netanyahu talked about. There's the dismantling of the Iranian nuclear program. Option number two, also good, is that Trump tries to get a deal. He understands the Iranians are not serious, and that provides the framework for a joint Israeli-U.S. strike on Iran, maybe an Israeli strike with American backing, maybe a joint strike. Right. I don't know yet, but that Trump comes back to the table and he can tell the American people who don't want war, he can tell them we tried to solve this through peaceful means, that failed, we now have to use other means. And that's very important politically. But the third outcome, which is the one the Israelis worry about, and I think you and me have discussed this on and off air, is that Trump, to get a deal, compromises on some of the core issues, and that the Iranians keep their right to enrichment, which means that the Iranian nuclear program is not dismantled. It's put in the deep freeze, and the Ayatollahs can take it out of the freezer at a moment of their choice.
And that postpones any chance of the Iranian regime being toppled by the Iranian people. So here's the thing, though. I'm saying if you are the greatest superpower in the world and you are asserting your authority, and I say this about Israel and Gaza as well, then why are you anxious to make a deal? You should be laying down the law. And by the way, you should understand, I'm a total Trump supporter. And I think it's important to say this, because I'm not saying this from a position of opposition. I'm saying that any negotiations involve lowering yourself to their level and saying, okay, we're in negotiations, like a real estate deal. No. You should be saying, sorry, this is ending now. And if you don't end it now, we bomb you, which is what he said originally. And deals are not good with jihadist, Islamist, ayatollahs who fund and train terrorists all over the world.
I do agree with one thing that you've said, which is very important, and we discussed this, I think, on a previous episode. But I do believe there is a window of opportunity now for military action against Iran that might not be there in a few months. Iran is weaker today than it's ever been in recent history. Their friends in Lebanon, Hezbollah, has been taken out of the picture. Their military ability to hit Israel. We were always concerned in Israel that we strike against nuclear targets in Iran, and then we get missiles from Lebanon. It was like having the Soviets having missiles in Cuba on America's doorstep. It gave them a huge advantage. That advantage has substantively been taken away from the United States. The Syrian regime has changed. It's not necessarily going to be good, but it's no longer an Iranian satellite. It's no longer in the Iranian axis. And that means the ability of Iran to cause trouble from Syria is also much lower. It also means maybe Israeli pilots can fly over Syrian airspace on their way to targets in Iran. The situation in Iraq has also changed with the weakening of the Shia axis. And in the two strikes that we did against Iran, the ones Israel has talked about publicly, we've actually taken out a lot of their air defenses, their radar, their anti-aircraft. In many ways, Iran today is more vulnerable for both regional reasons and the own tactical reasons by taking out their air defenses than they've ever been before. And so it's clear to me the Iranian strategy is to try to buy time, to rebuild their military, to rebuild their air defenses and so forth. And they want to push these negotiations on and on and on and on. And I ask you, as a Trump supporter, does he understand that that's the Iranian game? Does he understand that they just want to buy time, that they won't make a single concession on the real issues?
It depends whom he's listening to in his inner circle. You have different camps in his inner circle. I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that everything you described is precisely the reason not to give the Iranian regime any hope. It's our mistake in Gaza as well. It's why I always was against humanitarian aid going into Gaza. I was always against. My issue is when you weaken them, that's the time for victory over them. It's not the time to say, okay, now halt, and now let's talk. No, they should be begging us to talk. They should be begging us, okay, don't kill us. And I don't care who it is. I'm talking about Iran, Hamas. This is all from the same jihadist playbook. So everything you described about the region, and Netanyahu was right. He said he was going to change the face of the Middle East. But if we always resort to something that's a Western knee-jerk reaction, which is peace at all costs or not at all costs, but, you know, we don't want war. Who wants war? No, we want victory, and you can't achieve victory if every time you come close to it, you then let the enemy say, okay, hold on. No, that isn't the way to achieve it, and not with Iran, and not with Gaza, and not with anybody. And that's my concern, totally. And I don't think, when I say this about Trump, it's not that I think he has a bad ideology about it, but I think he may be misled because, again, he says, no, we would prefer diplomacy over war. Well, you know, diplomacy has rarely worked over war. It works after you defeat your enemy. And then you call the shots, and that I call diplomacy, not before.
A few answers. Number one, if you try in good faith to get an agreement and the other side doesn't allow it, it does give you legitimacy with your own people, I'm talking about the American people, to actually do something more. Okay, because they tried that path, it didn't work, we have to stop the Iranians getting a nuke. I would also argue that the vulnerability of Iran, the weakness that they have today, the move of U.S. military assets to the region, especially the B-2 bombers on Diego Garcia, all that vulnerability that Iran feels, maybe, just maybe, there's a possibility, I didn't say a probability, there's a possibility that that sort of forceful movement of military assets and their fear that Trump is crazy enough to, go for them, is there a small chance that we actually do get a good deal, a deal that Israel can live with?
No, not a good deal. Again, I would like to say I want to remove the word deal. And I prefer dictate. We dictate to them, and then the Iranian people who want their regime to fall, but they can't go up against it. I mean, they get shot in the street. I don't want a deal of any kind. I want a dictate. You dictate to them.
I have to understand. Theoretically, we can both say the probability is low. But theoretically, if Trump can get a Libya-type deal, you're still against that?
Yeah, because it won't mean anything. Again, how many deals have we made with jihadists that they're not worth the ink they're written on? That's why. I don't believe in a deal, because the West adheres to deals and the jihadists don't. And therefore, look, the Obama deal was bad, the JCPOA, and Trump ripped it up in 2018. But the point was, one of the reasons it was bad wasn't just because it kicked the can down the road. It was bad because right from the get-go, Iran violated it, which it will do with any Trump deal, because those are barbarian jihadists, and their aim is domination over the West and annihilating the Jews, and that's the fact. So since that's the fact, we have to stop using the same playbook, and that's our problem. I gave Prime Minister Netanyahu much of the benefit of the doubt in the beginning of the war against Hamas, because we had such a hostile administration in Washington. When we all praised Biden, who was dissing Netanyahu right from the beginning, but arrived in Israel a week or something after the war broke out. But what did he do? He said, don't launch a ground invasion. Some friend. Okay, so I understood that Netanyahu was in a bind. Now he's in the opposite kind of bind, a totally different kind. But again, if we believe this conference is a lot about truth and lies. It's a lot about how JNS presents the truth against the lies, and about Jews having sovereignty, belonging in the land of Israel and not being, colonialists. Well, do we have sovereignty or don't we? Can we act in our own interest, even if, as I said, not to be hostile to Trump, not to go against Trump, but to protect our own interests? And by the way, we never asked for American boots on the ground. You say, the American people don't want to go to war. I don't know which American people you're talking about. They don't want boots on the... That's true. We know that. Who wants boots on the ground anywhere? We want our kids killed? No. The question is it necessary? Now, it may not be. Americans may not feel it. Israelis do. So we're saying, no. We'll put our boots on the ground if we need to go on the ground, and not only from the air. We're not asking for American boots on the ground. We're asking for American support with weapons and air support and moral support and political support. And so far we've been getting that. And this business of a deal, and President Trump also was asked about humanitarian aid into Gaza, and suddenly he said, yes, we have to give them aid. And I'm thinking, what? Where did that come from? Because President Trump, he talks. We have to see what he does, not how he talks. But that was very worrisome because, again, then Netanyahu will say, well, President Trump wants us to bring humanitarian aid into Gaza. It's bad. It's a bad policy.
There's like when you talk about the U.S.-Israel relationship, often one thinks about American presidents banging their fists on the desk at the Oval Office saying, you need to do this or else I'm going to cut off aid, I'm not going to send you weapons. And that's, a form of pressure on the Israeli government that we've seen in the past under different administrations, including Republican administrations. George Herbert Walker Bush was very tough with Prime Minister Shamir, yes? And Reagan sanctioned F-16s for Israel after we bombed the Iraqi nuclear reactor. Right? They could be tough with us when they did to. Trump is a different sort of challenge because he hugs you. He says, I love you. He says Israel has no better friend, and maybe he's right.
No, he means it.
He means it.
By the way, he doesn't just say it. He actually does love Israel. He's not being phony. I was talking about a policy that he made that I think is misguided.
No, but
not that he has ill will.
Up, it's much more difficult when someone bangs their fist on the table, and you. It's easy to say I'm banging back. When he says I love you, and he says Bibi Bibi, I only need a few months to get this deal.
I know.
It's a difficult one.
It's terrible, and that is Netanyahu's dilemma, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I'm not speaking for Netanyahu. I imagine that this is a dilemma he faces. Speaking for myself, I think that what he needs to do is convey, if he needs to preempt a deal, then the best he can do, or the Israeli government can do, is convey to the U.S. Congress, we have many friends, to convey to convey to Trump as well that we have no choice.
Look, I was with Obama, I was with Netanyahu when we went to the Congress in 2015 to speak out against the JCPOA, Obama's deal with Iran. And then there was a large group in the Congress who were critical of Obama and were very sympathetic to Israel. And he was invited by the then Republican Speaker of the House.
Yes.
Now, both of us follow American politics very, very well. If Netanyahu has a fight with Trump, does anyone see people in the Congress standing up for Netanyahu against Trump? It's a different situation.
I agree. I didn't say a fight. Yeah. I am now talking about the way you said that Trump, behind the scenes, Trump is probably saying to Netanyahu, look, give me a chance to do this. If not, we'll do this together or whatever. Okay? I'm now talking about Netanyahu, what he says to Trump in a friendly way, not in a hostile way, where he's impressing upon him. Listen, you have your interests, and we have very similar interests. But in this case, Iran is already showing pictures of executing me, and they haven't changed their aim to annihilate the Jewish state. So there's a moment at which we have to make our own decisions, and whether Trump will experience that as going against him or being hostile.
What other part of the speech, besides that section on Iran, spoke to you most? I'm talking about Netanyahu's speech from last night.
What spoke to me the most about Netanyahu's speech was his reiteration of the world being divided into good and evil, basically. He didn't use those words, where he made it very clear that Israel's role in the world and with the West and against the barbarians, I think that was really, really crucial, because the other stuff is the technical stuff, the stuff we have to do to ensure it. And I believe that I believe that Trump is a great friend, and he means it. I think that I'm hoping that behind the scenes, it's not just in one direction, Mark. You're always imagining that Israel has to take into account both the enemies and the friends. And I'm saying, and they also have to take us into account.
I tell you what I found interesting last night. He said it before in Hebrew. I think it was the first time in a while he said it in English. When he talked about it's crucial that when this war is over, Hamas is no longer running the Gaza Strip. He talked about the different war aims. He said he wants to get all the hostages out. He talked about them being in Gaza, up to 24 hostages still alive, and a 30-something, unfortunately, who are dead. But he says at the same time, that's a goal, but this cannot end. This conflict in Gaza cannot end with Hamas in power.
Right.
That Hamas will just rebuild itself.
We know that.
Rearm, and the next thing is we're back to square one. And he talked about that also in the framework of the region. What does it say to the region that Hamas stays in power when this is over?
Of course.
Does that not energize all the jihadists, all the bad actors throughout the Middle East? And the opposite is true. He didn't say, I'm saying now, that if you defeat Hamas totally and completely, that's a very strong message to all those same bad actors. It's a message of deterrence. It's a message, you hurt Israel, we will hit back, we will find you, and we will destroy you.
Okay, and on that note, we're going to end, but I will just say what you said about Gaza, I say about Iran. The message is, no, these enemies of the Jews and the West cannot remain in power. And that's it.
And that's different. You're calling for regime change in Iran. You're
No. I'm not. Yeah,
You
the
said stay in
Iranian.
power.
No. Well, the Iranian people can do that, but the way they stay in power is by having all these weapons and wanting to annihilate that's the way they stay in power, and with all their proxies. And I'm saying the message has to get out to all of them, and Iran is the head of the octopus there. So
it's 100% correct. If you look at a lot of the problems Israel has faced over the last 10 years, and you look for the address to those problems, it's Tehran.
That's right.
Hezbollah in Lebanon, Assad, the Houthis,
and the Houthis, that's right.
Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and so forth. And so I agree with you. Change in the situation in Iran or Iran's regional strength that affects Israel's national security directly. And I believe, I said it, I think a week or two ago, 2025, this is the year for the Iranian issue to be decided one way or another.
Well, on that cheerful or not cheerful note, until next week.
When we'll be speaking from the studio and not here from the conference.
That's right.